Hey everybody, thanks for jumping in. I'm AHLC, Ann Hyland with Ann Hyland Life Coaching. So I wanted to talk with you real on this subject of father, okay? And this is such a key element in understanding your trauma and understanding why things don't go as you would like them. So when we think about God and our idea and concept of God, we probably have a variety or various, definitions or descriptions based on our upbringing, based on our circumstances. In my case, I had a Catholic Christian upbringing, and I knew the basics of the 10 Commandments, that you should not harm somebody else, that you should be honest, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't commit any crimes. So that was my, quote, basic understanding. Even though I went to Catholic schools for many years, there was some Bible indoctrination, but a lot of it was incomplete. It wasn't taught in a way that it was more really the watered down version. That's the best way I can describe it. It's not that it wasn't incorrect, just that it was a very watered down version. So, my idea of God is an idea of a loving father who also corrects when I'm wrong. And that's my idea of how I understood my godly father to be. So, as I grew up and matured as an adult, I started to look at my own father. Now, as a child, you're not paying attention to all these things all the time. You're probably not making these types of assessments when you're that little. It isn't until you're an adult that you start to connect the dots and you start to think and sense and feel that, you know what, something's a little weird with my family. It seems a little dysfunctional. And then you start to see that the fathers that are your, quote, parent, your father who's your parent, the other fathers in your community, meaning your extended family, that you start to see their deficiencies. You start to see their strengths, where they are leading you in the correct direction and where they are leading you in a negative direction. So for me, because I had trauma very young as a child, I saw this very quickly. I saw that I couldn't necessarily trust my parents because they weren't listening to what was really going on, and they weren't listening to what I was telling them. Number two, my extended family, I was abused by my uncle, so I didn't trust him or other men in the family. So you can start to see how I began to have a, quote, pulled away, rebellious nature towards authority, because the authority that was in place to protect me in the sense of parents and family and extended family and community, they had failed me. And because they had failed me, I started to become a more independent person with layers of protection and boundaries because I didn't trust the men who were showing up in my life. Not to say that those men didn't have excellent qualities. I could go on and on about how much I love my father, how talented a person he is, how incredibly wonderful and intelligent he is. However, he did not truly lead our family in a biblical foundation. And that was the error. That was the main fallout of our family, is that we were not being led by a godly, fatherly image, because my own father was not properly aligned with God the Father. He only had a worldly understanding of it, not a biblical understanding. And as a result, I struggled with trying to piece and make sense out of the damage that caused. And that has taken me my entire lifetime of therapy, lifetime of coaching, and all kinds of modalities that I have undergone to repair the damage from what was done from my own father not being the leader that he should have been. Now, what I say with all this is that my story is not so, quote, uncommon, because most people that are in the world today, they come from dysfunctional families, such as dysfunction from alcoholism, drug addiction, narcissism, and just the breakage of broken families, divorce, multiple partners, confusion, the shuffling from here to there. And as children and as young adults, I'm sure, just like I experienced, you experienced the struggles of trying to trust people in authority, because when one person lets you down and then the next person lets you down and it goes on, we begin to just not believe that it's possible for men, or quote, men, to be a proper godly fatherly image. And so as a result, I began to take the responsibility on myself to learn and understand the Bible. I took the responsibility on myself to understand that what I was taught and what I was exposed to was really not for my best interest. And therefore, because it wasn't for my best interest, I started to discover that I had a lot of trauma recovery and repair work to do, because the men in my life, my own father, the men that were my extended family, the pastors in the churches that I attended, none of those men were really demonstrating and honoring what the Ten Commandments say. They weren't really demonstrating and honoring who God is. And they didn't have a personal relationship with the Holy Spirit through Jesus's death, burial, resurrection, receiving that Holy Spirit through the Spirit, sorry, I'm losing my mind. Through the baptism, water baptism and fire baptism. So the point is, because I had practiced and spent time and energy in order to be able to focus on making God and, seek first the kingdom of heaven and all his righteousness, and all will be bestowed to you. Okay. So because I was in the Word, in the Bible, getting filled up, starting to learn what proper behavior was, when I looked at my family and saw that they were not exhibiting this behavior, now my mother was, but my father wasn't. And so I started to see where the relationship between my parents was breaking. I started to see the relationship where my own immediate family was breaking. And all of it was because my father, my dad, became influenced with the world. He was more interested in going out and partying with his buddies on, the music ministry team. He was more interested in, playing pool and hanging out and grabbing a beer than he was in, really taking charge and leading our family to be a biblical family. Now, he might have taken the vows at his marriage with my mother, saying that he was going to do those things, but in reality, he didn't. And as a result, so many things fell apart in our family, with the beginning thing that when he was drunk or passed out or not paying attention, that's when the physical and sexual abuse was happening to me with my uncle when we were at family events. And when I communicated this, my parents were looking at the worldly person that my uncle was, who again was a very intelligent, charming individual. But the bottom line is nobody wanted to believe or accept that this man was a sexual predator and that he was violating me. Nobody wanted to understand that. And so as a result, I became frustrated because the authority figures in my life, my mother, my father, my extended family, I couldn't trust them because they weren't comprehending what I was saying. So as a very young girl, and we're talking about the age of 3 to 5 here, okay? I got down on my knees. I knew how to pray, and I literally prayed and asked for a personal experience to get to know Jesus. And guess what? Jesus showed up. He truly did. And I saw him in his, glowing light. And I then began to start having conversations with the Lord. And he explained to me that no matter what happened, that he had my back, that he loved me, that I was his daughter, and that he would continue to care and look after me. Now, at the time, being that young, I really didn't understand what all those things meant. But I did know that I had someone to talk to. And so I created, at such that young age, a personal relationship with the Lord. Now, when other people look at that scenario and they see that I had that type of foundation, it does make sense that I would understand and get messages in the sense of talking to people or songs or an intuition to go here or there. And usually there would be people that would show up that would be a support system for me, or that would lead me to the next step in my journey. And as a single young teenager, after again years of abuse with being sexually violated, as a teenager, and being brutally beaten and raped by a fraternity, I started to understand that men were real jerks. In fact, let's just be real. They were assholes, predators, manipulators, and I couldn't understand why I kept attracting this type of scenario. But again, at the time, I didn't know. I wasn't connecting the dots in a biblical way because, again, my role models were not leading me in a biblical way. So I hope that gives you some inspiration as you begin to connect the dots in your story, in your trauma, and you start to see the relationships with men and how they manipulated you or requested or required you to do things that were totally against your will, that involved physical violence, sexual violence, and mental abuse. And I'm going to pick up again in another video on what you can do and how you can learn and compensate to take measures to protect yourself. Thanks for listening.